Welcome back to a week of channeling here at Fortune Cookies Tarot. We are going to jump into Wallis Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor, and see what she thinks about the Meghan situation. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Fortune Cookies Tarot. I'm Annabelle. I'm a tarot practitioner and psychic for over 35 years. And in this video, this is part of my channeling series for Meghan. We've got Harry and Meghan back in the United Kingdom, and we are taking a supernatural look at our dearly departed royals to see how they advise over this. So we have already heard from Prince Philip, who understood exile and duty oh so well. We also heard from Princess Margaret, who is a royal spare who had to make some concessions on her own in order to remain in the royal embrace. So today we're going to be calling upon a woman whose relationship became the center of the greatest royal crisis of the 20th century. Wallis Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor. So Edward VIII relinquished the throne and married Wallis. They gained freedom to live together in Europe, but they lost their place inside the monarchy and spent most of their marriage outside of Britain and never really entirely escaped the consequences of the abdication. So we know that Harry's not a king and Meghan is no Wallis Simpson. Megxit is not an abdication crisis, but Wallis uniquely understood what happens after a royal man chooses marriage over duty, and after the grand love story becomes ordinary daily life. What is shaking out over that? What does she make of the Megxit situation? Does she recognize herself in Meghan? There's a lot of people out there that have found similarities and commonalities between the two women. Does she sympathize with Harry? Does the Duchess of Windsor recognize Edward's weakness repeating itself in a family bloodline? So we are going to open up my channel to the supernatural, and we're going to allow Wallis to let her feelings come through. We're using the Curious Creatures Tarot to speak with her as well. So we are going to have some fun. A lot of you are telling me you love this series. If you want me to do a channeling a week, I can do that. We can always do that. You know, I love historical figures, dearly departed figures. I'm here for it. Let me know in the comments down below what you would like to see. Maybe our weekly series takes on a channeling day every week. I don't know. Maybe we're doing that. We're tinkering with the schedule for the fall, and right now you guys seem to love it. I want to welcome all of the new subscribers. We've had a lot of new people jump into the cookie jar and into the membership, so thank you very much. I will aim to keep you guys entertained all day long. So let's talk about some historical context for those of you that aren't really familiar with Wallis Simpson and the Edward VIII or Duke of Windsor David crisis. So Wallis was born Bessie Wallis Warfield in Pennsylvania and raised in Baltimore. She'd been divorced once and was in the process of divorcing her second husband when this constitutional crisis had erupted. Edward VIII had reigned for less than a year. And on December 10th, 1936, he signed an irrevocable instrument of abdication, renouncing the throne for himself and his descendants. His three brothers had witnessed it. Bless you, Greg.
Thank you.
The familiar tale that Edward simply gave up the throne for love compresses a genuine constitutional crisis involving the government, parliament, and the dominions. The monarch could not independently overrule his ministers and remain a constitutional sovereign. So there was more at play in here. The abdication made his younger brother King George VI and abruptly placed Princess Elizabeth, the late great Queen Elizabeth, directly in line for the throne. Edward then became the Duke of Windsor. He and Wallis married at Chateau de Condé in France on June 1937. By some accounts, she was reluctant to marry the former king, then Duke, because she simply wasn't that in love with him. And she had begged him to not abdicate in favor of marrying her. They lived primarily outside of Britain, and the freedom to marry did not produce a normal private life. They remained financially, emotionally, and socially very much entangled with the royal family, but held at an arm's distance. Wallis received the title of the Duchess of Windsor, but the question of royal status, precedence, and the use of an HRH title remained a bitter issue throughout their marriage. Their relationship permanently altered the lives of George VI, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth, and Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth being the Queen Mum. Wallis therefore understood that something Meghan may not. A royal departure can continue reshaping other people's lives for generations. So Wallis did not merely marry a former king. She had to live with a man who surrendered his purpose. And again, somebody that she wasn't super, super keen on. And she did this with a family that believed her presence helped force that surrender. So there's a lot of commonalities between Meghan Markle, and we've all said she's making the bullets, Harry's firing them. Same thing with Wallis Simpson. So we may be seeing something repeating here. So Wallis's first impressions of Meghan. We're going to start to unpack that. Like I said, I'm going to be using the cards. I'm also going to be using this amazing obsidian sphere from Otter Spirit. It is always on my table. I am an ambassador for Otter Spirit, and they do have some nifty products that are going to sunset at the end of this month. Every month they have featured bracelets and gemstones. Sometimes they don't keep them around. So don't miss out on this, because I missed out on the fire quartz for July. I kept telling myself to order it and I forgot. There's a couple of cool things in there. So go shopping at the link below. Tell them I send you, either by using my link or by using the discount codes. So let's get into some channeling. I'm going to bring up that card view, and I hope you are having a fabulous day and enjoying this fun series that I'm doing. So Wallis's first impressions of Meghan, we are going to talk about it. Wallis understood charm. By most accounts, she was an extremely stylish woman, something that Meghan has wanted to do. And I'm going to answer it now before anybody puts it in the chat. People have asked me, is Meghan the reincarnation of Wallis Simpson? And I am going to say no. She is not. I've read on that before, and I do not think that they are the same person. But this weekend, when you don't have anything to do, take a spin down to your local streaming service and rent the movie Dead Again. Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson, and Robin Williams is in it. It is, oh, and Derek Jacobi, can't forget him. It is an amazing story about past lives, and sometimes things get a little mixed up. So back to Wallis Simpson. What was her immediate impression of Meghan when she arrived on the scene with the royal family? What did Wallis Simpson see here? Four of Swords, that's our noun. And the Fool 2.0. That's very interesting that the Fool 2.0 came up in the Curious Creatures Tarot. That Fool 2.0 is definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Did Wallis, in fact, see some of her folly in Meghan? One card for this, kids. Boom. If Wallis Simpson could have advised Meghan in the early days of her relationship with Harry, she would have said, shut up and pay attention. Shut up and pay attention. Very important words there. Don't make the same mistakes that I did. What was that in regard to? Wallis is saying, shut up and pay attention. Was it in regard to the family, the royal family, or was it in regard to Harry? Now, Harry is not presented as a super weak individual, but certainly needy. I think that the Duke of Windsor also was quite needy. So maybe we're seeing some similarities that are generational. So was it pay attention to the family? No. Was it pay attention to Harry? Yes. What does the Five of Cups mean in this situation? Five of Cups is typically an individual who is looking at the glass as half full all the time. I've said that Harry was probably one of those kids when he was in school, he was cosplaying as a poor person, and he took that silly game into his adulthood and his marriage. He decided to cosplay as a normal person, but he turned around and said, well, I'm going to cosplay as a Hollywood celebrity. And he took off with Meghan, always looking at the glass half full, never satisfied with what is in front of him. Meghan probably should have recognized that Harry was a complainer and not a doer. So, did she find that Meghan had genuine charisma when she entered the family? So, her advice to Meghan is that they're not going to love you. They are not going to love you. You can step in with all the warmth and generosity and kindness that you can muster, but the royal family is not going to love you. They are going to scrutinize you. That is their job. Meghan did, by Wallis's estimation here, try to come in and woo everyone. She wanted everyone to think that she was lovely and so kind, the same kind of personality that she is forcing down our throats with things like As Ever and with Love Meghan. So that over the top kindness, it's not necessarily charisma, but it is an emotional tool that she was trying to use on the royal family. And Wallis says, don't bother. They're not going to fall for it. They're not that stupid. They are going to move away from you and dislike you, because being in the royal family is more about strategy. Did she think that Meghan understood the difference between celebrity and royalty? No, Meghan did not understand the difference between celebrity and royalty, and she thought that they were interchangeable. We know this because she thought that everyone was performing when she was getting introduced to the Queen spontaneously. Harry said, do you know how to curtsy? And she said, why would I curtsy? It's your grandma. I love grandmas. And Harry was like, no, it's the Queen. So Meghan clearly did not understand that. We have that story straight from their mouths. We know that, and it's confirmed now by Wallis Simpson with that Six of Wands in reverse. Did she see Meghan as socially skilled? Yes. Did she see Meghan as socially skilled within the royal family and the aristocracy? Nine of Wands, the moon. She was trying to hide who she was and was trying to align herself with some of the aristocracy. She was desperate to find commonalities with some of the people in those circles. And I do think that she struggled to hit the mark with some of them. Discussing cosmetics and clothing seemed to have worked. But when she tried to step into some grander conversations, perhaps about polo or investments or, really, really higher echelon travel, I think she fell out. I think she was unable to keep up with the pack. And I think there were a lot of people that looked at her a little bit side eyed. So, does Meghan remind Wallis of herself? I think Wallis sees a lot of commonalities as well out of the steps that Meghan has taken to move into that microculture of the royal family. I think she sees mistakes and missteps that she also took. But it seems that Wallis Simpson would retreat and kind of reorganize herself, whereas Meghan goes, no, this is my goal and I'm pushing through it. And I think a more practiced hand with the aristocracy in the royal family would have been able to understand that this is not a force situation. This is a quieter situation. Remember the Queen's whisper and the King's command. And I think Meghan was attempting to command. There's something about her interrupting that Wallis is bringing up right now. There's something about her interrupting that Meghan would interject herself into conversations. And it was like using a crowbar to get into the conversation. Meghan had taken, this is early on in the relationship. And she keeps showing me Meghan at the event that they were dismissed from, where Meghan said she was bored. It was in the days after the wedding. She had a great outfit on. And she said she was bored. I think Harry got stung by a bee at that same event. And she was laughing at him. Meghan kept it at that event. I think it was the King's birthday. At that event, Meghan kept forcing herself into conversations and then would not leave and just was not. She was really selling herself and selling her personality. And Wallis was like, get off that. Back up, girl. Wallis didn't have an accent like that. She had a Philadelphia accent. She probably talks in a transatlantic accent. I don't know. I've never heard Wallis Simpson speak to any length that I've recorded. But the discernment of when she was unwelcome in conversations is something that Wallis said that needed practice. But there was so much ego with Meghan. She just was like, I outrank these people by the grace of marriage. And now I'm going to force myself into those conversations. And Wallis said, I swallowed my tongue more than I would care to admit. She swallowed her tongue a lot. So I think this particular personality aspect makes Wallis very concerned about about Meghan's ability to navigate the royal halls. So is there anything in Meghan that Wallis does admire? Is there anything in her that she admires? She admires more. I'm gonna say it, guys. There's a spirituality in her and a self-care that Wallis admires, and that I think Meghan put some very hard guardrails on that when she entered the royal family and started dating Harry. There's a legend, a legend already, a story about her putting Harry in his place after he spoke abruptly to her, and she said, "You will never speak to me like that again." Um, I don't think that that is necessarily what Wallis is referring to, but I do think that the self-importance, Wallis had to sacrifice a little bit for her relationship with the Duke of Windsor. And I think that she sees Meghan as not compromising on anything. And that is something that she admires, because I think she was not given that grace. She was not given the ability to do that. So let's see. The Wallis Simpson, Duchess of Windsor. Duchess of Windsor. Do you think that Meghan genuinely intended to be a working royal? Do you think she intended to stay when she got involved? No, she wanted the half in and half out, according to Wallis Simpson here, guys. The half in and the half out was always the plan of Meghan. She was never considering this a full-time gig where she would give up her other gigs. There was always the thought of marketing and promotion and merchandise and labels and all that. That was always in her mind. She was going to do that. There's something about sheets. She wanted to make sheets at some point. Like, I don't even know if that's happening. I don't know if that's listed in the copyright or the trademark registration. But she had always wanted to do self-promotion and then retire from the royal life back to California with her established brand. It was all branding. So, did she want to be a royal? No, she wanted the sparkle so that she could go and create a brand. And I do think that Wallis is like, that was a pretty smart thing to do. Does Wallis think that the departure, Megxit, was that part of the grand plan, or was that something abrupt? Was that part of the grand plan? It was abrupt. It was abrupt. That Fool 2.0 is very interesting, isn't it? Now, Wallis and David were not exiled, but I do think that they were encouraged to not come back. I think they were encouraged not to come back. The Queen Elizabeth II, was very gracious to Wallis when David, Duke of Windsor, did die. And they did treat her with the respect according to her relationship with him. But this is very interesting, because this says they had to go. They had to go. They were on the freedom flight. So why did they have to go? Wallis is saying that they were asked to leave. They were asked to leave. So there is the famous video and still shots of Meghan coming out of the event that had been canceled by the Queen because Meghan refused to attend a meeting with the Queen at the Queen's pleasure. She said, "I have another event I have to go to." And so the Queen had canceled that and sent Sophie and Edward to go pick up Meghan and allegedly take her rings and put her on a plane. So I think that Wallis is giving us a little bit of a hint here that they did, in fact, ask her to go. She was asked to leave, according to Wallis. Maybe they made her an offer she couldn't refuse. So Meghan had intended to leave at some point, or intended to do this half in, half out. And Wallis just kind of confirmed that the Queen said, beat it. Beat it. So how does Wallis feel about the way that Meghan has treated the situation that she found herself in as a royal bride? Two of Wands. Really, Wallis? So Wallis says, well, I had a very different lived experience from her. My situation was very, very different. I agree, because Meghan is not married to a future king. She's married to a present dolt. Um, had Meghan accepted more help, her plans and her intentions would have not been found out quite as quickly. Does Wallis think that the crown should have continued to finance and support the couple? Five of Pentacles. Too bad, so sad. And you weren't a king. You got to go out there and you got to learn how to live. And there's that 2.0 again, guys. I think this little guy is going to keep showing up. So, too bad, so sad. You want to leave? You're going to have to struggle and fight the way that we did. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor apparently skipped out on a lot of bills when they were abroad. There were a lot of vendors that would send bills back to Bucky P and see if they could get them fulfilled. And I believe some were and some were not. So they did skip out on their bills quite an awful lot. So she does not feel that they should have been financed. I think it was primarily because they had struggled so much, Wallis and the Duke of Windsor. So what does Wallis think of Harry and Meghan's marriage? So Wallis lived inside a marriage that had to justify an abdication, a change of the political structure of the United Kingdom for the rest of their life. There were a lot of opinions about their marriage. So, that devotion, David's devotion, he did say that he was going to take himself off the earth plane several times to her, where he could not live without her. Is it devotion, or is this a burden? So let's see. Does Wallis believe that Harry genuinely loves Meghan? No. How about Meghan for Harry? Meghan's holding on to it. She's not letting it go. She is not letting it go. Why does she not think that Harry's love was sincere? Seven of Wands. He's just trying to balance himself out from manic and sad. And he puts a lot of dependence on the other person. Again, this is something that Wallis had to do. She is an expert on this. So the marriage was supposed to make Harry kind of stabilized in his mind. And for Wallis, that she says that is false love. Now for Meghan is over there, the hangman in reverse, trying to figure out where she's going to secure that bag, guys, trying to figure out where she's going to secure the bag. And we've got the world in reverse, so she's not letting it up. And the 10 of Swords, she's had enough. So she is just biding her time, according to Wallis. So Does Wallis see a great deal of David in Harry? Six of Swords, Six of Cups, Page of Pentacles, Ace of Cups, Nine of Pentacles, and Four of Wands. I do think that she does. And I think that she finds, without that gilded cage around David, the Duke of Windsor, that he was able to find some peace without the pressure. Some, not a lot. By all accounts, he did look back upon his life in a manner of not being successful because he was not afforded agency over his life. Very, very similar to what I think Harry is experiencing now and what I think Meghan will start to say about him. I think that Meghan is going to say, well, he never could be a success because he was shackled to the royal family and the expectation was up here and we were starting out from ground zero. I do think that Wallis thinks the application of a smaller life to Harry, a really miniature castle like the Petite Versailles, having a shrunken down life would have been better for him. The Montecito house, too big. It is too big. Something smaller would have been more manageable. 4 or 5 bedroom house with, a little piece of property and some space between him and the neighbors, would have given him peace. And at times David had peace like that. And she thinks that the application would have a similar effect. But she thinks that Harry, too, is going to have some very bitter tastes in his mouth about every advantage that he was given. He is going to be somewhat bitter about it. Does she think Harry is going to be better at home? We're going to do this real quick. No, home is a disaster. We'll unpack that a little bit more. Is moving back to England. Does Wallis think this is a detriment to their marriage? Absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, they are putting everything in front of Harry that Harry loves. Bangers and mash, clotted cream, cup o' tea, all that good stuff. London fog. Those are all the things that Meghan hates. So what is broken in the marriage may become glaringly obvious, and may create some space between them. Does Wallis believe the marriage will survive this move? Does she think it will survive? No, she does not. That is a release. That is a release, kids. That is a release. So I want to stress again, Harry didn't abdicate the throne. However, like Edward, later David, he was a royal man who came to define his departure through the woman he loved and his conflict with the institution. I do think that Wallis sees some commonalities between Edward/David and Harry. We're both men already dissatisfied with their royal life before the relationships began. There's Harry and David. Harry, David. David was looking for a way out. Harry was looking to recreate the sweetness of his childhood. And perhaps that is the sweetness before his parents broke up. Perhaps that is the sweetness before the internet took over our lives. Um, Harry looks back, David looks forward. There's a difference. There's a difference. Harry is looking back, trying to recreate something that is gone, and David is trying to manifest something that cannot be. So similar in their demands, but different in execution. Does Wallace think that David, Edward slash David, used her to escape his role? No, she does not think that. Does she think that Harry used Meghan to escape from his role? I got too many cards on this. Eight of Pentacles, Wheel of Fortune. Harry wanted his work, according to Wallis Simpson, to be better recognized. And if he threw a temper tantrum, all eyes would be on him. All eyes are on him right now. Everybody's paying attention. Did David or Edward transfer the responsibility of his decision to Wallace? Is Harry doing that to Meghan? Harry blames a lot of things. Blames a lot of things on his failure. A lot of things. So, does Wallace think that the titillation of rebellion is fading in Harry? Yeah, he is. He knows that he messed up. Harry absolutely knows that he messed up. He was on a long vacation, basically, in America and Canada. He's on a long vacation. He was not effectual. He was losing the organizations that he was supporting, sent to Bali, Africa Parks, Travelists, who we're not hearing from anymore. Invictus is like the last man standing at this point. When the excitement of rebellion fades for Harry, according to Wallace, Harry will find that sweetness. All roads lead to home. He's home. He's now glaringly going to see his lack of success, the failures of those patronages, leaving those roles. And I do think that she is confident. Wallace is confident that when the rebellion fades, he is going to realize that any rift was exacerbated by his wife. Her name's Meghan Markle, if you don't know. So, does Harry now resent the life that he has built with Meghan? Yeah. There's that full 2.0. All of the potency is gone out of him. That full 2.0, I'm wondering if that's the gaslighting and love bombing and gaslighting and love bombing and gaslighting and love bombing that's coming through. Wonder if that's what's coming through. So very interesting. Very man of little agency. So David's wound, Six of Swords, was that in order to be his own man and direct the traffic of his life, he had to give up a place where he had supreme power in the royal family and in the United Kingdom. What is Harry's wound? Harry's wound is that he is from a broken home. He considers himself from a broken home. A la Good Time, not Good Times. Any of those TV shows where you have a broken family. He is seeing that. His wound is that his family did not stay together. Harry, lots of us are children of divorce. You gotta get over it. What is their shared weakness? They're both impatient. Important difference between the two. The home factor. I need more on that. Harry, deep down, despite all the protestations about safety and security and all of those things, Harry deep down finds England comforting, and it is home. I do think they are moving him a little bit north. He's going to be a little bit in the north of England. I don't, I know everybody was saying that they may keep a London place, but I think they're going to be up in the countryside. I just think they are. I saw hills. I think they're going to be up there. So David never felt, he was more cosmopolitan, more worldly. He felt like he was a citizen of the world. And I think that Harry and Meghan had a great opportunity to be the Commonwealth representatives for the United Kingdom. And that would have been very similar to like how David saw himself. Like he was kind of day tripping from country to country. But Harry feels more at home. David feels more invigorated when he is traveling and when he's seeing things in the outreach. So I think David perhaps has a little bit of that Meghan in him too. She's real good on the first meeting. We talked about that in one of the other videos, that like she's much better in smaller dosage. So does Wallis accept that she was the cause of David leaving the royal family? No, she doesn't, because he was the king. How was I going to say anything to move him? How was I going to tell him not to do it? Again, Edward gave up agency over all to have agency over his life, only to find that that was so much more limiting. Very neat. Very neat. What about Harry? Does she think that Meghan forced Harry to leave? Absolutely. That's a yes. That's a yes. There's the Fool 2.0 again, guys. And there's the Two of Cups. We are going to break that covenant with the royal family. That Fool 2.0 keeps coming up. It's probably going to wind up on the cover of this video, the thumbnail. It's alarming how often that is turning up. But this means we're doing the same things over and over again. We are going to bludgeon them with our lack of work. We're just not going to work. And they're going to figure out that they need us. They need us to come back and do the work. Surprise, surprise, didn't happen. So Edward was the sovereign. Harry was a supporting royal. One relinquished the throne, one relinquished royal duties. Both departures became global stories about men choosing their wife over the monarchy. I think, according to Wallis, I'm going to go with Wallis. I don't think she had a lot of control over David. I think she had some control in certain situations. She did spend all that time in China learning unique skills for the bedroom. But I think that Meghan actually convinced Harry to attempt a pedestrian life where they would pretend to be poor while they lived like they were rich on somebody else's expense. So does Wallace consider Megxit a genuine sacrifice for the Sussexes? No, she thinks that it was a dumb move. They shouldn't have done it. Was the Sussex departure better planned than the Windsor's departure? No, this is abrupt and flakily and without really having a conversation about it. Um, they should have done it in a more controlled process. So, what does Wallis think of the idea of half in and half out? What does Wallis think of the idea of half in and half out? It's a great idea, but the royal family is never going to go for it. Why does she think that? Elizabeth would never let it happen. And she's not saying Elizabeth II, Queen of all queens. She's talking about the Queen Mum. Now I know the Queen Mum was not alive during all this, but wrath would rain down from the Queen Mother if this half in, half out was even entertained. Wallis says there's no way. No one would ever allow that half in, half out. It's foolishness. It creates a breach in the castle walls that will be impossible to stop up. That's what she says. The half in, the movement, the energetic movement of going back and forth between the castle and pedestrian life creates way too many fluctuations there. Specifically, Wallis says their staff would be problematic and not vetted for work in any of the royal households. So they would have a pedestrian staff and not a staff that was trained with the other royal household employees. It would be a little different, a little bit different. So, oof, oof. So, what does Wallis think Meghan misunderstood about exile? So, um, Wallis had the lived experience. She was, basically exiled. I don't want to use the word exile because they technically weren't. Um, you know, Leaving the palace can feel like liberation for like the first few weeks. And, Wallis lived through the rest of that time. So, um, Wallis, what initially was liberating about leaving the royal family? It was not having the schedule, being able to get up and do whatever you want that day. We're going to have tea and toast. No, today we're going to have ice cream and roast beef, and then we're going to go for a walk. That was liberating, being able to make the decisions about having the whole day stretch out ahead of them. So, what did Wallis miss most about her tenure in the royal family? Page of Pentacles. The security of the future. The security of the future was something, not having to think or plan what is next. That there was always going to be money in the bank. There was always going to be time and funds to do whatever they needed to do. And there was always something planned. Again, having the day stretch out ahead of you is lovely. Having the next 3 decades stretch out ahead of you is not quite so lovely. I'm surprised. I thought she was going to miss the jewelry. Just saying. Just saying. So, what does Wallis think Meghan discovered about living outside of royalty, having once been there? It's not fair. It's not fair. Without their protection, you know what? I'm telling you guys, she is going to come back. Meghan is going to come back really hard. It's going to be in her book when the book comes out. And she's going to say, the deck was stacked against us. I was fed to the wolves. I wasn't thrown to the wolves. I was fed to the wolves. Basically the same thing. Come on now. But she's going to say that we never once touched by royalty, we were never going to be able to earn our own keep, and therefore the royal family should support us forever and anon in the manner in which we were accustomed to. She's treating departing the royal family like a divorce, and she's trying to call the terms on what she thinks she deserves. What does Wallis think of that? That she's treating Megxit like a divorce? You have no power here. They are not going to give you a thing. Back off. Get off that. Get off that. This is back off this. The get off fat thing is from History of the World, Part 1. So we all love Mel Brooks. God bless Mel Brooks. Thank God. 2026, you're not getting Mel Brooks. He already took my Tim Curry. I'm very upset about Tim Curry, everyone. Very upset. So
Don't even put that out there.
I know. He's over 100, though. So let's see what Wallis thinks about the titles. Does she think that Meghan and Harry should retain those titles? No. How about Harry? To be determined. How about Meghan? No. No. She doesn't think that they should keep the titles. So what does she think is the outcome of that? The no titles. They become truly outside of the royal, truly outside of the royal family. And there's a little off with your head kind of vibe here. So does she think that Harry and Meghan wanted more validation of their mincy work? Did they just want to be patted on the back a lot more? Four of Cups, Wheel of Fortune, Magician, and the Ten of Wands. They thought that their skills were underutilized. They did. And does Wallis agree? Nah. You know, don't start nothing, won't be nothing. Wallis Simpson don't start nothing, won't be nothing. You know, like, can you just shut your mouth and listen? Like, that's kind of the thing. I think, Wallis, when you were mixing in the aristocratic circles, did you just like use that listening skill?
She needs to stop being a jabroni and go her role and shut her mouth.
Yes. So Wallis only used kind words when she was speaking to people. She kept all her shit talking for behind the scenes. When she was out with people, and that is a flaw for Meghan. Meghan allowed people to see her displeasure. And Wallis says that was how she was putting people off. She should have been nicer to them at all times and kept her complaints in a very, very small circle. Instead of reprimanding people directly that she was upset with, she should have gone around and had their leadership or management handle it. So Does she include Harry in that? Should Meghan have sent Harry to complain? Yes, because he better understood the rules, could have gotten things done better for her. She got too big for her britches. She got too big for her britches. If it is no trouble, would you please bring me a cup of tea? Instead of, I need a goddamn cup of tea right now. So, Wallace, do you think they can sustain this kind of a rootless existence, as said by the mom in Titanic? A rootless existence is appealing to you? Can they sustain this lifestyle? Absolutely not. No, they're just, they created their own misery by separating, by going across the pond. What does she think will become of these two? What does she think will become of Harry? And what does she think will become of Meghan? Harry is going to be an abject failure. And Meghan Fool is going to rebrand. She will rebrand. Does Wallis think she will be successful in her rebrand? There's that Fool 2.0. No, it looks like we're going to have same old, same old. Same old, same old. Are we going to get complaining out of Meghan? Are we going to get bitching and complaining in a big book? Six of Pentacles, giving no quarter to anyone. How difficult it was. Everyone was against me. I will endure. And even if I don't have the skills, I will endure. She's not going to make any magic happen. But the promise of restoration and phoenixing herself out of this ridiculous situation she's gotten herself into is how Meghan's going to cope with this. So, what does Wallis advise Harry? What does she advise Harry? Queen of Swords is cutting. 10 of Swords, if it's not working for you, you got to get out of it. 9 of Cups, that's what you left in the past. 8 of Wands, that's the mea culpa there. And the Justice card, even more mea culpa. So what I've got here is Wallis's advice. You got to end the relationship that you're in because it is far too much and far too complicated. There are knives and swords and everything laying all over the place. What fuels you is the safety and security and the blessings of the past. So this is what you want to get back to. You don't know, Harry, if there is a return to this, but all roads lead to Rome. So you can give it a try. You've got to give it a try because otherwise you are going to feel as unrooted as David abroad in Europe. So make sure that you keep those warm and fuzzy feelings about your family, that you're going to have those feelings of nostalgia. Up here, announcing, making some news, talking about things. Look at that nice big mouth. And the Justice here, this is mea culpa. This is something that Harry needs to do. So, Wallace, I have long said that Harry could write a book, How I Survived a Narcissist, My Marriage from Hell, all of that. Would that be enough of a mea culpa for him? 4 of Swords, he's thinking about it. Would Meghan eat his lunch? I think if he cut a piece off for Meghan, she'd be fine with it. If he said, I am going to write a book about how our marriage crashed and burned, I think if he makes her sound better, she'll be okay with it. But if he says, this is how I survived a narcissist, I don't think she'll be okay with it. So who would be? Who would be? Who would be? So, Can Meghan ever replace the proximity of royalty with the proximity of Hollywood? Is there still an opportunity for her to do that? Still an opportunity for her to do that. There's the Fool. Now, There's her die is cast. She can pretend that she's sweet and kind and very nice and charming and putting pretzels in a different plastic bag, but the reality is that she cannot change her character now. Wallis at one time had to accept um the mantle of being a kingdom wrecker, not just a home wrecker, but a kingdom wrecker. And Meghan is going to be seen as a family disruptor. She's going to be seen as someone who disrupted an entire personal family, not a royal family. And that she took one of their weakest members, that weak little gazelle on the edge of the herd. Meghan scooped it up and thought that he had bazillions of dollars in his pockets, and he had very little in his pockets. So, Wallis was relentlessly discussed and scrutinized during her lifetime and continues to be, especially now that we have the Harry and Meghan situation and there are so many close commonalities between them. Wallis did not blast out their personal information all over the place. Meghan and Harry have chosen to. Would Wallis have chosen to tell her entire story had media offered the same kind of platforms that are now available? Would Wallis have told her whole story? No. No, she would have let David tell the story. Does she understand Meghan and Harry's impulse to control the public narrative? Yes. Does she believe that the Sussexes crossed a line? I'm having a deja vu right now. Had Harry said at the wedding, we're not going to be working royals, we're going to go about our business, would have been better. The judgment to say one thing and then actually execute another, mixed messages there. They should have just formulated a plan and done it. Does Wallis think that their revelations about their experience with the royal family has weakened the possibility of reconciliation for Harry? King of Swords, he's got to do the mea culpa. And if he does that, he is going to feel the relief. Will the royal family accept him back? It'll take a long, long, long time. And Meghan is going to have to not be in the picture. Not be in the picture. Does Wallis think that these two have anything left to sell? 9 of Pentacles, 9 of Swords. They don't. Some of the things that I have discussed over the last week with some of my friends. I have a friend who is a writer, and we were discussing how experience and going out and doing things will generate more writing material. Stephen King, in his book on how to write by Stephen King, it's not how to write, there's a different name for it, but Stephen King talks in the forward about how many of his stories started out with, what if a little girl was the result of two parents that were in government experiments with psi ability, and they have a baby and she has pyrokinesis abilities. What if a dog was infected with a demonic personality that, was in a bat that bit him. All of his stories have started out with some facsimile of what if. So this what if they can never balance the scales of what they've done. They can never do it. I think Harry, we may get to see him when he is an old man, if he lives that long, tottering around as the crippled prince. He crippled himself. Um, I don't think that there's a return from this, because they have now created a situation where they need to be protected but remain neurotic inside of that protection. They have made enemies everywhere, and at this point I don't think that there is any safe quarter for them. So do they have anything left to sell? No. Do they can they bottle neuroses and sell that? I guess. um it just seems like they are all out of jam and stuff and everything else. So uh oh, my dear, my dear. So the abdication of Edward David, Duke of Windsor, um, put pressure on Queen Elizabeth's father, because now he was forced into leadership role that he never expected to take. The abdication changed Elizabeth II's life before she was really old enough to understand the scale of it. Wallis understood that Edward's decision placed the crown upon George VI, and all that pressure ultimately it would be upon Elizabeth. How did Wallis feel about the burden that was placed upon Elizabeth's family? She was just glad that their future was not going to be disrupted by ruling. How does she judge the way that Harry treated his grandmother? Bad form. And bad mojo. Bad stuff. There should always be deference to the crown. What about Meghan's treatment of Queen Elizabeth? There's that Fool 2.0 again, guys, and the moon. She never liked her. Wallis tells me that Meghan was never going to have any kind of respect for the Queen other than what the Queen had in her wallet. Money actually had her face on it. So what does Wallis think Meghan misunderstood about the Queen? Meghan could never get on the inside of the circle. She tried to understand what royalty was, but it was a role, not a lifestyle, not a culture. What does Wallis think that they owe to Elizabeth's memory? They owe a lot, but there's nothing they can do. Again, the die has been cast. The die has been cast. They cannot change what has happened. So we get to Megxit now. We're at the present situation. Harry and Meghan may be returning geographically, but are they actually returning to the family or the institution? There's a lot of discussion right now that Harry's intending to stay for 10 or 12 years, presumably for the duration of the kids going to school. Other people are saying that Meghan is going to flip-flop back and forth between California because she needs to run her media empire. So what does Wallis think of this Megxit return? For Harry, And for Meghan. For Harry, 5 of Pentacles. He's still going to remain on the outside of the family. But 7 of Pentacles, he's going to try and level that out. For Meghan, she's not staying, guys. She is not staying. She's not going to stay in that country. She's going to zip in, zip out. She's going to be on plane more than she's going to land there. So much for Travelist, I guess. So much for Travelist. Does Wallis think Harry and his children being there will mend some bridges with the king? Yes. 4 of Pentacles. Harry's going to have to put those kids on display. We're going to have to see them. And I think the king is going to order it. Will the king order it, Wallis? No. Dang it. Wallis thinks the king should do it, but Wallis doesn't think that the king will do it. So, will Meghan have any kind of positive response from the public? No, not at all. Not at all. What is the greatest danger in returning without resolving the original conflict? Is exile. An uncomfortable exile. You're not doing anything here. We can't support this. An uncomfortable exile. But Harry won't leave. Harry won't leave. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Commonwealth country, maybe. I feel at this point, Africa becomes less romanticized. Australia becomes more romanticized for Harry. I think he is leaning into those Australian roots when he was a jackaroo for that, 6 weeks he was there or something like that. So I think we're getting into that. So how does Wallis see Meghan right now? Who does Meghan believe she has become? The devil too, huh? The devil too. Who Wallis believes Meghan has become? An unknowledgeable person who is seeking answers. What has Meghan successfully achieved? The break from the royal family, and what has she sacrificed according to Wallis? All the opportunities out there. What does Meghan want next, Wallis? 9 of Wands, Ace or Page of Wands. She wants to blow up the whole system. She is going to trash things. Wallis, do you think she is going to use the Meg's Inn experience to finish her book and blow up the royal family? Absolutely. There it is. 2 of Swords. She's going to let the world know how terrible that entire family is. So I do hope that they are going to put some conditions on that divorce settlement. So what is Wallis's direct advice to Meghan? We're going to stick with Meghan here. Direct advice. What would you tell her right now about her situation with Harry? Page of Swords. It's time to get out, Sugar Plum. You're going to be exposed. Break up. Justice right there. They're never going to give it to you. Queen of Pentacles. You're never going to make any money. The only way that you secure your bag is by divorcing Harry. Wallis has spoken, guys. I think I am going to leave that there. I'm not even going to do Wallis's advice to Harry. I am going to leave it alone. I'm not going to have her advise anybody else in the royal family. So this was long and wild. And wow. What do you think, Fortune Cookies fans? Wallis may have understood the romance of leaving better than anybody else. but she lived long enough to understand that the bill arrives after that. And sometimes they did not pay their bills. So, did she recognize herself in Meghan? Not necessarily. Did she see any of Edward, David, and Harry? Yes, I do think that she did. I think she sees some commonalities between those two men. So, let me know what stood out the most to you, and let me know if you think that Wallis would have advised Meghan, don't do it. Curious about that. In our next reading for tomorrow, we are going to hear from Edward himself, David, the Duke of Windsor, the man who signed away the throne for the woman he loved and then had to live with that decision for the rest of his life. After hearing from Wallis, I have some pretty pointed questions for David. So we will meet back here tomorrow, same time, and I will see you in the future.